You guys used to do meetups way back when.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, COVID kind of killed them. And the problem is, there's no school for Roku. The Roku channel from Roku has their tutorial, which is so dated, it's virtually useless. And if you try to get, there's stuff out on the web, there's not a lot. If you ask ChatGPT or an AI, it gets confused between BrightScript for Roku and BrightScript for BrightSign, and it'll send you on wild goose chases, giving you BrightSign constructs that don't work on our Rokus. Because the lines are really vague as far as ChatGPT or any AI can see. So we all end up self-taught or by mentoring, which I had a mentor way back when, by reading the docs, which the docs are great, but they could be greater, or by these forums and these Slack channels. So what happens is we have 100 people here that between us, we have massive knowledge on Roku. But we all have some number of the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and we don't know what pieces we're each missing. So I may be going nuts trying to do something that a much easier way to do if I just knew about it, or vice versa. So the whole idea of these meetings is just kind of a meeting of the minds. Between us, we have massive knowledge. No one of us has it all. So kind of loose right now. Ness says COVID did kind of make Zoom and virtual meetings a thing, yeah, but it kind of also killed the meetups. The idea is this isn't a formal regimented meeting thing. It's just kind of chatting, and then people can ask questions, and we'll try to answer them. I won't have all the answers, but other people will. I might have some I can answer. I am not a guru, so I'm going to say things that are just plain wrong. And you guys can kick in and tell me I'm an idiot and correct me so I don't send people off in the wrong direction. But the first thing that I figured we could talk about is VS Code. People used to code this on Eclipse. People used to code this on Vim. I've heard of people using Notepad and then going in and manually doing uploads, doing their gen keys, going through the whole process of side loading and running. And for iterative development, that's just a nightmare. Where what you guys wrote, Bronley, Chris, and the others involved, for VS Code just makes it brain dead easy. We hit F5 and it just goes. The debugger in Roku, absolute nightmare. It works. You fire up Telnet, you fire up the Roku debug program, it works. It's just so much easier in Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is free. I got confused early days because I'm a Visual Studio user for my C# stuff, and I was trying to make it work on Visual Studio. No.
They dropped the ball on that name. I mean, it's brand recognition, but it's not the same brand. Like, it's not even.
Well, that's like
the editor, though.
Java and JavaScript. They have nothing to do with each other. So let's go with the hot buzzword.
Yeah.
C# has nothing to do with C. It's Pascal. But let's go with the buzzword. So same thing with Visual Studio Code. It's not Visual Studio. It's unrelated to Visual Studio. But it's what, if anyone here isn't using it, you're causing yourself a lot of pain because it just does everything for you. And Bronley, I'll kind of let you take over on this one a little bit as far as what all it can do. But even if you're not running BrightScript, which if you can, you probably should, but even if you're just running the language extensions, so much is now automated that we don't have to deal with anymore. So I'm handing it to you now, Bronley.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a little history just on why the tool kind of came to be. I came from the web development world, and so we had every tool at our disposal and so many like awesome debuggers and editors and features. And I came from Visual Studio proper as well. And so I wrote a little Roku app just to like serve some media off my Raspberry Pi, and then it was working, it was great. And then Roku emailed about having to change to Scene Graph, and was like, okay, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna work on this app again. And I just got so fed up with the slow development cycle, like running shell scripts to sideload things or zipping stuff yourself. It was just a lot. And so I was like, the first thing I want a formatter. So I made a VS Code extension that just did formatting. And there's actually somebody who'd already made a Bright script language VS Code extension. So I got in touch with them. I think it was Kelso AF was the name. It actually showed up on Slack a couple of years ago just to like say hi. So I communicated with them, and they actually were willing to transfer the extension over to me. So then I got some of their syntax highlighting integrated, and then I added the formatter. And then I was like, it might be not too bad to just like have the start debugging just zip it for us. So I did that. And then I was like, I bet I could auto inject stop statements where the breakpoints were. And then that came about. And so just kind of like snowballed from there. And I was doing all this in my spare time. This was just like a hobby project while I did web dev work. It's my full-time gig. Just over the years, I mean, Chris and Brian kind of showed up. George, they all started contributing to stuff. I remember at one point I made George mad because I like wouldn't add some really specific George feature, and he like threatened to fork the project. And I was so mad for like the whole day. And at the end of the day, he messaged, he's like, yeah, never mind. It's probably not a big deal. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, it's so frustrating. But we're buddies, so it's good. Yeah, so I mean, this thing has just kind of grown sort of organically out of serving my needs at first as a hobbyist Roku dev into what it is today, which we have. I can pull up the number of users, but it's something like 3,500 users, unique users a month. Let me see if I can get signed into my dashboard and I can share this. This is pretty cool just to show some of the numbers. But yeah, so it's just kind of grown as people showed up and were like, hey, this is a bug, this is working, this isn't working. It's just kind of grown. And then I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, Fubo contacted me and said, hey, we really need you to be working on this full time. Will you come work for us? And so I got a full-time gig working on these tools to maintain them and be able to put my full efforts into them. And that also opened the doors to be able to kind of collaborate with Chris a lot more, because we can make tools that work for what Fubo needs as well as for the community, and kind of justify a bit more time on them even further. So yeah, here's the dashboard.
It's awesome that Fubo pays you to help us.
Yes, and Roku, if you're listening, it'd be great if you guys had some of your own people to help too, because there's a lot to do.
I've sent messages to Roku with a list, you, Chris, several others, saying, why don't you just hire these people? Just make this a real thing.
I think it would be beneficial for there to be more official support. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's the telemetry dashboard just to kind of show the usage. So yeah, we have 3,600 unique monthly users of the extension. And this number's kind of stagnated around this. So part of me wonders if like my free version of the telemetry just like runs out of events and it's actually more. But I think this is right.
Yeah.
We kind of use some of these things. I do have the telemetry that we track. It runs through VS Code's like official telemetry tracking software. So if you tell VS Code don't track me, then our extension will honor that as well. And there is also we tried to actually see if I can find the docs. I don't know if it's on here actually. Where's the docs? It doesn't really matter. There's a file that kind of we tried to put all of the telemetry tracking in one file so you could clearly verify what we're actually tracking. And so we kind of strip out a lot of this stuff. So like if you are using files array as an example, we don't track your files array. So we have no idea what your file paths are in telemetry. We just want to know, have you customized the files array? Have you turned this feature on away from the default? So this is available. This is kind of, we try to keep it as focused as we could to let people know how we're tracking, just to make sure that, features are actually being used and whether they're worth investing our time. But yeah, I don't know. I could talk about how the extension works a little bit. I've done a bunch of those presentations at the Dev Summit though as well, so I'm not sure what you want to get into exactly.
I don't know if we want to get super deep on how just it's there.
Yeah, sure.
Tons of stuff for you is there if you don't know it's there.
Yeah.
you have videos out there on how to use it. And
yeah. So we've been collaborating with Roku for the past 3 or 4 years on the debug protocol. So when we first launched the VS Code extension, it was only for telnet debugging because debug protocol didn't exist. And then about like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even a little longer, Roku released like version 1 of their debug protocol, which was like a full binary socket protocol that made it a lot better for debugging, because then we weren't getting into weird situations where our regex telnet scraper would like mismatch on a thing, or you get a thread that interjects itself in the middle of your message and all of a sudden you're lost. And so back in, when was it? I want to say it was like February, or it might have been November. In the last 6 to 9 months, we switched the debug protocol to be on by default. And we've had almost no complaints. We tried to do this a year and a half ago, and it was a big issue. Well, we had a couple of like experience problems with it. We fixed all those. As you can see now, like all the blue here is the debug protocol. Like most people are using the debug protocol now instead of telnet. And so like another fun number is the number of debug sessions. We have 150,000 debug sessions launched from the debug protocol every month, and 32,000. So 180,000 debug sessions a month are launched from our tool, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, but if we're doing iterative development, me and probably many others, how many a day am I personally launching?
I know, right? So maybe it's not that many.
It would be cool to know how many actual, the breakdown of Roku development, how many are hobbyists, how many are professionals.
Yeah.
And the professionals, I've never dealt with paywalls. I never had to.
Mm-hmm.
I might know Scene Graph, I know BrightScript well. I've never done paywalls. I've never done audio only. So even among the professionals, who's doing what? Numbers would be awesome, but we don't have them.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not something I can anonymously track on.
No, I mean,
so
everyone has their specific need.
Yeah, maybe Roku could, put that number. They'd be the ones to know those numbers, like potentially just by the amount of money that the apps make, maybe a slight indication of the type of content. Because I would imagine most apps that have any kind of subscription integration, those aren't hobbyists. That is way too much work to figure some stuff out. Yeah. So anyway, the VS Code extension, it's all open source. It's all available on GitHub. And yeah, I don't know. What else do we talk about?
Well, what I had on the list was getting into the, without being too basic, getting into the program structure. So you're in VS Code. Hopefully everybody is. You have your launch JSON inside your VS Code directory, which, I have my IP for my Roku. I have a comment after that of my 6 other Rokus. That way I switch anytime I want. I have my custom files directory, all that. We all have the manifest.
Mm-hmm.
Your basic minimums, your version, and your splash stuff. And then other stuff there if you wanted. I wish they would put constants in the manifest. They don't, so be it.
What do you mean?
Something in the code, either in code or in the manifest, to say, here are some names and they are constants.
Oh, you mean like const app theme color equals red.
Yes.
Use this as like a constant variable in your code.
It just becomes a variable in the code where you don't have to deal with the M's or the globals or noise. It's one of my requests up there with switch case. That's been on the list for 14 years. But yeah, so you have main, you have components. Components, everything has to be specifically specified. So if you have an XML uses anything, you have to link them directly. Main is different. It's all one big file. If you have main with 12 directories and 57 files, it's one big file to Roku. Main, you can see it from the components, and it's great. You can, most of us, including me, basically run main for the keep alive. But there's stuff you can do in it. You can't run timers. You can't do anything scene graph. But, you can do HTTP. You can do a lot of stuff tasks can do. but you do have rendezvous. Evil, you can't avoid them 100%. We try to avoid them when we can. But, that's something bit me a couple times where I was experimenting with different inits, and I found out main is one big file. You can't create another one with a different init for testing. They will run smack into each other when you try to run it, because main, no matter how many directories, how many files, is one big file.
Yeah.
Then you get components where everything is specific. Everything has to be told where it is. You don't tell it where the XMLs is because create object finds them for you. But all your source has to be very specific. From what I've seen, you don't have to use components. Source is looking for. Components, from what I've seen just playing around, you can call it anything you want as long as you link it up correctly in your
You're saying the script files for components.
Right.
Component discovery, absolutely, you have to use the folder name components, and they have to be XML files. But yeah, another fun point around that is, this could be like list item.Bronley. They don't do any validation at all. Why does that still think it's BrightScript? That's fascinating. Okay, they must just remember. So, they don't care at all what the file extension is for things that are referenced there. It needs to be BRS for your source folder to be discovered.
Your source folder.
Right, but because I think there's like a discovery there for like find all .brs files in the source folder, and there's actually a max depth. I have that in BrightScript. Yeah, I'm not sure if you knew this. Yeah, there we go. And let's see if I can find that.
If you hit the max depth in your source directory, you might want to rethink your architecture.
Let's see if I can find that number real quick.
Is it 9 directories or 7 directories?
7.
Yeah.
Right here. So if I think you're only allowed to have 7 directories, and the moment you put something in an 8th, it will go down on you.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't actually validate the file extension here. It just assumes it's a BrightScript file, and this I don't think that matters either. The type text BrightScript, and it'll load it. So there's no magic at all happening within like the component.
Now I have noticed, like, you renamed the file there.
Yeah.
I have noticed at times when I start renaming files, I'll rethink some. Exit Visual Studio, come back. It gets real confused.
Yes.
We do too much of that.
And I was so optimistic that the language server would fix that. So those of you who are unfamiliar, we have added a language server to VS Code, which basically understands your project structure, and then it spins up a full like separate process that scans all your files and builds an in-memory representation of your project. And then that's how it's able to do this validation. And so like if I rename it again, now it's happy, it knows that those scripts are there, etc. So the language server is what's powering that. And we had a bunch of issues with the language server where there were just race conditions. I designed it kind of, again, organically. It slowly grew into more and more, and we kept running into timing issues where, if you add a file and then you type a little bit, then you rename a file, like some of the events are all firing, and it gets really confused. And so the in-memory state kind of gets out of sync with what's on disk. So we rewrote most of the language server, at least the bindings between VS Code and the language server, which significantly improved the stability. There should be a lot less crashes. And that's on by default now as well. I think that's the one we released in March. But I was hoping, back to our original point, I was hoping that the mass file rename would be fixed, and it still isn't. So if you were able to consistently reproduce the problem, I would love to be able to sit down with whoever can do that and kind of debug through what is causing it to get out of sync. Because it's really hard to reproduce. It sort of just happens sporadically, which makes it really challenging to fix. But so just to clarify, rather than having to actually close VS Code and reopen VS Code, what you can do is run the restart language server action. And
Okay.
that will fix the problem as well, because it completely destroys the process that was bad in the first place and spins it back up.
Okay.
You can also do it down here. If you click the brighter script version at the bottom, you can click restart language server from there.
Okay, I didn't know about
It
that.
saves you a little bit of like having to like close it, reopen it, find a folder, just
Well, when you reopen it, goes back to where you were anyway.
right.
So close and reopen takes all of what, 3 seconds?
Yeah.
But yeah, I did not know about that restart. That's cool. But yeah, it's normally when I've done a bunch of renaming. Just because I want to rethink how I'm doing something or something, and it just gets real confused. So, but close for me, exiting, restarting, reloading, always fixed it. It was happy again.
Yeah.
The other thing I figured we get into a little bit is the threading. We know we have tasks. We know we have main, which most people, I think, just do a keep alive loop, like we've talked about. You can do more. You have components, which I thought the components that are our primary thread and the render thread that's refreshing the screen was 2 separate threads, and I've been corrected on that. It's one thread. That the same thread that's running your components is the same thread dealing with screen refreshes.
Hmm.
Like I said, I always assumed it was 2 separate threads. That one's just waking up 60 times a second, whatever, and doing its double buffering overlay, whatever it's doing. But no, it is the same thread. And then all your tasks run on their own thread.
So that also means that I'm assuming whenever you do something like a really heavy row list, like content change or something, there are times where your code in the render thread isn't going to be able to run until like the OS is done doing some of their render work. Maybe Brian or Mark could even speak to that as well. You guys have.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Because I'm not sure if you've ever tried to put like a huge number of items in the content or row list. It basically it'll just choke, and you can hit execution time out there.
Yeah.
We just as a word from the street on something. Recently, we had an issue where we're trying to make the row lists that we're using kind of we're not using row list, we're using our own kind of implementation. But again, it was a similar issue. We're getting a whole bunch of data from HTTP request, from a task, and here's a whole bunch of data, and then it's going to build all these, all these posters in the row. And one thing that we did to really, we did a few things recently to kind of speed up that thing, because that was a huge rendezvous. So like every time we would be getting that data, we saw the data content node from the task thread, and it's like, oh, there's a new content node, build this huge UI piece. And that was like, yeah, a lot of building lots of components all at once, doing everything and pushing all this data through to on the render thread. And while it's not perfect yet, one thing that we've done recently is 2 things. One is for to make those components that it's rebuilding as simple as possible. So in any kind of app, you might have like, here's the poster of the show, but you might want the title and the running time and the maybe a cart icon if you need to buy it, if you're not entitled to. So it's like all of these things, maybe a progress bar and all these sorts of things. Like it builds up quite a big thing, quite a big component. If you want that to be that same component could be anywhere, and any data could have any of these options on it. So like, instead of building it and then like, oh, actually these 8 parts of that component will just turn invisible because we don't need them, to really build it up specifically to say like, only add these things if they're needed. And second thing we were doing was using render tracking, which helped quite a bit as well, to say like, queue this item to be to when this this particular piece of your screen is on screen, that's when it does the load. Otherwise, it's just in memory as ready to go when it's ready to you know, so that it's ready to be rendered when it's going to be shown, instead of trying to render all these things that are potentially off screen or whatever.
You're kind of describing virtualization we do in some windows like WPF and C#, all that, to where it's like, figure out what's going to be on the screen and concentrate on those. Really don't need the rest right now.
Yeah.
And then as you're scrolling around, it's kind of rethinking, hey, this is coming on the screen, get it up there.
Right on.
I think Roku does a little bit of it, because if you're scrolling around on some of the channels, you'll see tiles loading as you scroll to them. It's like it's not really too concerned with them until they become visible.
Yeah,
So,
and I think in our case, we were doing our kind of a custom row list thing that wasn't necessarily taking advantage of that, but if we manually add that in, then it was really sped up load times quite a bit, actually.
I imagine.
So I saw a question about the folders thing that I was talking about before. So to give some clarification. So what I'm saying is for it's like this: A, like B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think this will work. Like it'll still discover that file, but the moment I put it one more folder deep, it will no longer discover that file. So stuff in there is just no longer visible. Like the auto discovery doesn't find it. Yeah, there we go. So we have a diagnostic. It's actually one above that. We have a diagnostic in the editor that tells you, hey, this file is way too deep. You can't do that. So then I move it up one level to G, and it's wanting about 8 now. I go up one more to F, and it's happy. So we catch this now. So you should be made aware. Most people weren't doing this, but we did, which is why we found it, and it was an easy fix. I don't remember if the same limitation applies when trying to import. Let's see. Put it back to H. It's not happy about that. So let's go ahead and move this whole thing under components. And now it's not used anywhere. So let's import that now, and from like list item. Is it going to complete for me? Yeah, so I think this is okay. I think the only problem is Roku added like a max depth to their auto discovery under the source folder. But I believe you can reference as far down as the file system will allow you, or some. There may be limitations. I don't think I've tested it here, but I think this works. So Brian, I think that should hopefully clear that up for you.
Yeah, thanks.
And then was there another? I think Naz might have also been nesting, level of nesting tops. Yeah, so I addressed Naz's question sort of directly there as well.
Unrelated to Roku, but auto discovery stuff can get real fun when you have symbolic links and you create an endless loop of your directories.
Well, yes, there was that too. Yeah, we had to solve that. Philippe actually found that one, and I think I did the fix for it, where we just don't follow symbolic links now for that one specific case. I think it was related to like auto discovering projects. So one of the things our language server does is when you spin it up, if you don't have a BS config out here, the first thing we try to do is figure out what projects are Roku projects. So there might be 3 or 4 folders underneath, and they all look like they have a manifest in the source file. So there's a bit of auto discovery that we add to make it easier for Roku developers. Because I mean, let's face it, we are a very small minority of developers in the in development world. Roku developers, there's a small amount of us, and so some people are coming from like Eclipse or Vim or some other editor that doesn't give you a lot of actual editor help. And so if you want to get diagnostics and validations and like completions, we need to understand the structure of your project. So we try our best to scan your project and figure out, is this a Roku app? And then we give you the flexibility to customize that. You can put a BS config. You can also set, this is a new thing called projects. And then you can like specify, project 1, flavor 2. Like you can nest all your different projects wherever you want and manually enter them. And now it will only run those projects and it won't run discovery. But the problem was, before we had this, and also even still with this, we were scanning your directories for manifest, I think, infinitely down. And so the fix was to not follow symbolic links. And also, I think we might have added like a max depth. Well, I can't remember. It's been a little while. I've had my head down in Dev Summit recording, so I can't remember what we've done there. But we solved that. So it's functional now. So if you're using a mono repo and you're using symlinks all over the place, you should now be able to run your Giganto project with a little bit less infinite loops.
No more Stack Overflows. One of the things touched back on was about the main thread. Lewis said that they use it for logic in their app, and I've done that myself too. It does. It's weird. Main kind of triggers scene graph and then forgets it exists. So you have all the break script stuff. You can do your HTTP. You can do all the stuff in main. But it's like once it triggers by you set your scene, your screen, you set your scene, and it triggers the scene graph to start, it's like it completely loses any track that it exists. So you can't do timers. You can't create anything off an ROSG node. Like I said, it's like it's a set and forget. It triggers scene graph and then drops scene graph. So it's kind of weird. Main's weird like that. A task can see scene graph nodes. A task can see everything. Main is like it starts it and then doesn't realize it exists, even though it started it. So yeah, main's a little weird like that. But yeah, I've done business logic in main too. It's just it's a dead thread sitting there.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, you put your while loop in main and you have it doing nothing. Literally, you can do a while true and while. Or you can do a while true and you put sleeps in it. If you just do a while true and while, how much bandwidth is main taking just cycling that while loop? Or does it have some logic in it to realize this is a dead loop that's nothing but keep alive, and it's not going to burn a CPU running a circle?
No, I'm not optimistic that if you did while true and while, I'm pretty sure that thing is just going to run forever. And just
What's weird is I've done it and I haven't seen a hit on the app performance of the app.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I've noticed that too. I don't know if you remember back, Bromley, the thing that George had discovered, because I used to use, I think get message, I think it is. It's like one of the undocumented, or maybe it is documented at this point, instead of wait. And the issue with that was you basically just had it like an really tight loop. And then, George realized that basically that was causing his Roku to get really hot.
Is that the one that like returns null if there isn't one? So you're just basically checking and getting null over and over
exactly.
again. When it happens to give you a value.
Yeah.
Let me draw that out here. So you're saying it would be something like event equals get message, or what was it? I'm not port get message.
Get message. Yeah. Yeah.
If
event, and if it doesn't do something else, just keep looping.
Yeah, that's definitely going to burn your CPU.
Yeah.
Now you said the Roku gets hot. If it's a Roku 4, they get hot just by existing.
Yeah.
You don't need to be working very hard. The biggest hardware misfire Roku ever did. They were asking about the timer and main thread. When I was playing with it, I would do my scene show, and I would literally have timer starts, the main thread sleep for like 30 seconds, and then try to do a timer. And by then, my app's already running. Things are doing great. And that timer would say something to the effect of no node to attach to. I forget the error message it gave.
Oh, yeah.
Even with scene graph running for 30 seconds, if I tried to do anything create object ROSG node in main, I'd get some crazy message about nothing to attach to. And again, I don't remember the exact wording.
Are you sure that was after you created the scene? Because I know for sure, like if you try and do stuff beforehand, it's really wonky.
I created screen, I created scene, and I showed the scene. And like I said, by the time the timer even, or the ROSG node even tried, my app's already interactive. Everything's good. And it would say there's nothing to link to. So I took it as just, other than starting scene graph is off limits to main. I could be very wrong. Again, 90% of all our knowledge is experimentation.
Yeah.
We don't really have the source code, the Roku's internal code.
The other thing, I don't know what type of node you were trying to hit. One of the things I ran into with Roku Test Automation was I was trying to have it extend node because technically there is no UI. Well, I guess technically there is a little bit of UI now in some cases, but the on-device component itself isn't actually any UI. And I was having it extend node. Technically, I think originally maybe it was group, and then at some point I must have switched it. And it took me forever to track down. The reason why it wasn't working was because in the case of when you try and initialize it from main, if you are trying to make a non-UI node, that seemed to always cause issues. So that's why it actually extends group.
So like
that reason.
Like a content node, for example, if you try to make one of those before you do that, that's just as bad.
Yeah. Like I was doing node, but I assumed content node would have the exact same thing because it's not a UI node.
So, and there's a little conversation going on in Slack right now that a lot of RSG does work in main. It's just not 100% like a task.
Yeah.
And when I was trying it with the timer, I was doing observe field. But if I remember right, it was crashing on the create object, but I could be wrong. This has been a while. But I just kind of put it down that, hey, don't mess with scene graph in main. And that may have been overly restrictive on my part, where instead of giving up altogether, it's just the way I was doing it was not ideal. You know how you are. You're under deadlines. You try something that doesn't work. You don't really have time to experiment and learn the intricacies. You just go do it another way that'll work. So that's kind of what I was doing. I found sleeps in main are fine. You know how a sleep in your render thread could cause you all kinds of grief. But I've seen, just little quickie code. I'll do a while true and then just put a sleep a billion. And if you close the app, it's going to close anyway. But it just, it's a keep alive. But like I said, when I tried it with just a while true and while, it really didn't hit app performance, which really surprised me. I thought that would kill it. I thought maybe it's a multi-core Roku and maybe one core is just burning itself out right now on the main loop. I just didn't know. We don't have the source code. We used to have the source code for the RAF, but they fixed that hole. Used to be the file you could include, you could literally just copy to a string and print. Years ago. Yeah, about 4,000 or 5,000 lines of code, if I remember. And it was interesting. Yeah, they closed that one a long time ago. I should have kept the copy. I didn't think about it.
It's probably floating around somewhere.
So, but I was trying to see because at the time, and I've not looked lately, RAF was a rendezvous hog. So I was curious why, and this is years ago. But yeah, RAF was very high on rendezvous. But anyway, but yeah, you have your main, do whatever you want within limits. You have your render where we do everything. It turns out it is the render thread. It is doing the screen refreshes. And then you have your tasks, which are great, but there's limited. I think it complains via telnet at 50 and dies at 100. But again, if you have that many tasks, you might have other issues in your.
Yeah, I don't think tasks were really intended to be used like that. Generally, I imagine most of them are intended to be used as like singletons or like services that kind of long lived. Now you can obviously if you're only gonna spin up 5 or 10 requests. I've seen people that spin up a task, do request, close the task. But we found that generally it's a lot better to have a pool of 5 or 10 networking tasks that are just always hot and just waiting for instructions to send a request. So you have like a global function you call this do request, and it's all right, what's the next round robin or free network?
You have one HTTP task that via ports and all that runs as many HTTPs as you want simultaneously. It spins up individual RUR transfers. But you would tell it this one, I want it repeater every 60 seconds. If it's like a config thing or something, this is a one-off. This one, I want 24 retries and all that. And works great. It fires off a new ROUL transfer, and then it knows to, kill it if it's not a keep alive, if there's not a repeat or a retry. And it's one HTTP task, and I've, out of experiment, hit it with 100 HTTP calls simultaneously, and it's perfectly happy. So yeah, there's not a lot of reason to have massive amount of tasks.
Yeah, so let me clarify a little bit with the networking. A lot of the time, if it's like fire and forget or fire with simple responses back, yeah, one task probably will do the job. The challenge comes when you're starting to get larger payloads back. Like, let's say you have something where you need to fetch each row of your carousel independently because of the way your API is designed. You need to make 15 or 20 requests, and you've got 50 or 100 cards or content in each of them. A lot of the time, devs will actually parse the JSON into an AA and then do a bunch of sanitization on it, or convert out all the content nodes before they send it back over the wire. And if you have one task doing that, there's a chance that some of your quicker requests don't get to run because you're currently processing a content node array. And so that's kind of the benefit of running the round robin, even if maybe you're even running on single core devices or like the dual core where they don't have a lot of free. The OS would at least kind of like thread swap sometimes. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe they don't do that, but we found that we got a significant performance uplift when we started spreading it out across a couple of different tasks because they use up a lot of your cycles processing and they're not able to get the next request out.
And in the case I was giving, it does zero processing. It is exactly. Return it. Processing is done elsewhere, either in another task or in render if you're doing an initial load, that kind of stuff. If you do your processing in pieces on a timer, to where you don't do 1,000 content nodes at once, but you have kind of a state machine that goes, doing stuff in the render thread actually works because most of the time it's waiting for them to hit a key anyway. So if you're doing it on kind of a state machine, their keys become the priority. They ask for something, it becomes what you do first, and then you're just using the idle time. Tasks do the same thing. I mean, tasks work just as well for that. But yeah, I believe that task limit does still exist to where it's happy at 50, 60 is complaining, but at 100 it's going to panic and shut everything down and just say no. Now, you have a thread running main, you have a thread running render. Does that leave 98 tasks or does that leave 100? I assume 100. I've never checked. So it might be 100 tasks, 102 threads. I don't know.
Yeah, does anybody have any info on that? Anybody know?
So this is one of those things that I went back and forth with George a lot because he was always like the fan of like doing a task per thing. Roku does call out in their documentation the recommendation, that they reuse them and not trying to like kind of build them as on the fly or like that, which makes sense. I mean, that's a lot of work you're having to spin up the thread and like that. So yeah, in general, I'm much bigger fan of keeping them around versus one-offs.
Yeah.
And I don't know the Roku internals. If they're using preemptive interrupt-based threading, it's not a lot of overhead on the CPU to have a lot of threads. If they're handling the round-robin cycling in code, multiple threads puts a load on the CPU. It just depends.
Well, I'm not sure if you know this with when you're debugging, the more threads you have, definitely it gets much, much slower the more you have.
Just the fact that they exist, even if they're idle?
Yeah.
See, I've avoided doing lots of threads, so I really have, I might have 3 threads running.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll do a thread also. This may be overkill. If I'm doing writes to the registry and you do the flush, I've done it to where I run that through a thread because the flush does take time. I mean, we're talking milliseconds, but on some of the older devices, I got in the habit of doing that on a thread because the flushes do take a moment of time.
I guess you're not worried about synchronization issues there. It's more just like keep track of some place I was at, and if another one showed up, it
was more like checkpointing.
Yeah, okay.
So I was all that, so it was like, keep the registry informed, which I try to avoid too much because writing to the registry is destructive to the device. These chips now are so good that you have to write just who knows how many millions of times. But it got to the point, again, on older devices where I was doing those kind of checkpoint writes, but I was doing them in a thread because of the flush. Reading's instant, writing's instant, flushes were not. It was going out to the EEPROM or whatever's in the device.
Yeah.
So
So I believe the OS is Linux based, and so I would imagine, going back to like the thread swapping, let me say this, I would hope that they are like doing the interrupt based as opposed to doing it themselves. But I may be misunderstanding entirely how even maybe Linux does that. I don't know, but I thought a lot of that stuff was interrupt based in general in Linux, right?
Yeah, but I mean, well, Linux is one thing. I work in the Windows world where you can count on higher end processors.
Mm-hmm.
Linux runs embedded, so they, because I mean, you got these Roku's. They say they're running $2 or $3 processors. We're not running, nice Intel i5s.
Yeah.
So I don't know when we get into advanced optimizations that operating systems do. I don't know how much that Roku's actually doing, because I mean, you're not dealing with a high-end multi-core system. You're dealing with basically a glorified Arduino.
Right.
So again, I don't know how far they go with that.
Yeah. I'm not sure it changes that much about our implementation anyway. It'd just be nice to know.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff internal. It'd be awesome if we had access.
Yeah.
They're not real open about that stuff for obvious reasons.
I think if people got a hold of the OS, they could start cloning it. Not that I'm sure it would be the easiest. But
clone the OS, and you got to write the whole channel store, and you got to write the whole paywall system. Even if people could clone the OS, it's not like you're going to recreate Roku easily. The device is one teeny part of the picture. In our world, sometimes a very annoying part, but still one teeny part.
Why doesn't it work this way?
Yeah. Anyway, we're about out of time, so was kind of looking through the questions here.
Yeah, is there anybody else have any questions, anything they want to ask?
NASA was mentioning the BRS debugger. It's mostly fine. You can't recall and edit the lines, all that. But yeah, I mean, but all the shortcomings are kind of taken care of in the VS Code stuff. And like I said, working with the debugger over the past 2 years, it's come a long way. I don't know how much of that is VS Code. I don't know how much of that is Roku. I live in the
and to clarify, when you say VS Code, all of that work is us on the VS Code side. It's not Microsoft magically making it work better.
VS Code extension.
Just wanted to clarify, like, we're not just getting magic-free improvements from Microsoft. Like, they handed us thing, and we're like, here, implement it yourself. So yeah, I wasn't trying to take credit. I'm just like, that's a labor of love, man.
So, flip-flop. Renaming in VS Code fails. Had to Kevin was saying he's had to restart. Lewis was using me as a workhorse.
Reiterate that, like, if any of you have a way to reproduce that fairly consistently, the smaller the project, the better. But I think it happens more in larger projects. But the smaller the project, the easier it is for me to be able to like iterate on and try to actually get it reproducible. It's been so hard to reproduce that one in isolation enough to like solve it, because this stuff is so asynchronous.
Yeah. Lewis had asked about team sizes. He said for Peacock, there are almost 40 engineers. I'm with Disney. My particular team has to do with user behavior tracking. I'm one person. That's it. I am the Roku team. I believe Disney has like 20. I could be off by a magnitude there. But they have the team for Hulu. They have the team for D+. They have the team for ESPN. They have the team for National Geographic. I mean, they got like 50 streaming channels. Most of them we don't even know about. So Disney's more individual teams, but they got to have dozens and dozens. You get HBO, you get, YouTube. So some of these guys are running, they're not running Scene Graph. They're doing more directly to a wire, which even big companies like Disney, we don't even mess with that because that's just a hassle. But I'd be curious to know the team size. Like I said, I've always been curious how many professional Roku developers there are in the world. I know there's a lot more jobs than there are of us. That's good for us as a seller's market. But I even on my LinkedIn, I specifically have a thing telling recruiters, don't contact me. I will not answer you. And I still get hits every week. It's like, you interested in a job? No, I made it clear on my profile. I like where I am. But yeah, like I said, I'd be real curious how many there are. that are actual professional Roku developers. Crave has 6 and 2 dedicated QA, you know. And as hard as, you know, it's like Peacock having a team of 40, they had to probably go through absolute nightmare getting 40 people together.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
Find one of us.
Yeah, I think Kubo, we were somewhere between 4 and 8.
So, and then, you know, you guys are ideally about to become part of Disney anyway, so it'll be a bigger Disney team. More developers I've never met. Kevin, I'm having a problem getting, okay, I assume that would be contracting jobs, because the full-time jobs I thought are plentiful. I'm getting hit constantly. Be it not Peacock, I'm sorry, be it what I just Discovery, Paramount, you know, Disney, so on and so on. I got the impression that Roku jobs are everywhere, but I'm thinking career jobs, full-time FTEs. Contracting jobs, I have no idea. And then it's also like which jobs allow remote and which jobs require you to be living in, you know, who knows, Plano, Texas.
Yeah, and sometimes those contracting jobs are like, we'd love to hire full-time, but we only hire US. And so if you're in Canada or outside the US in any way, sometimes the only thing they offer are contracting, which end up being kind of shorter term.
Paramount had a massive layoff. I'm glad I didn't take when they were talking to me to leave Disney, I'm glad I didn't.
Maybe for those people who have had success in the job market, maybe you could just write out some of your tips on Slack. That'd be really helpful.
For me, it was recruiter. When I left the job, my last job, it wasn't Roku. I was miserable there. My wife was like, take some time. What did you enjoy doing? And I'm like, Roku was a challenge. After 45 years, I've written all the CMSs and all the general ledgers and all the office automation, all that I want to write. Roku is challenging because it is quirky as can be. You know, you've heard me say wrestling a drunk toddler.
Yeah.
Programming Roku. So I put myself out there with recruiters and we started getting immediate. Now, this is 4.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I flooded. I'm remote. I'm in the process of trying to move to Greece. And they're like, yeah, we don't care where you live. You're remote. Live on Mars if you want, as long as you got a good, solid internet connection.
Fiber.
Yeah, which is limited on Mars. But yeah, we're talking moving over to Crete for and all that. But yeah, I'm still getting hit by recruiters all the time. I haven't paid attention to which ones are remote and which ones demand you be in office.
Yeah, I've been seeing a shift on a lot of companies talking now about bringing people in more, which is going to be a little more challenging. Real quick, your pool of Roku developers is this small, and if you're going to force them to come in, you're going to end up with like not very many. So
I've told recruiters that, because I'll get a recruiter say, you know, you have to be in house and we're paying $100,000 a year, and I'll call them and tell them, good luck. You have limited yourself down to virtually 0 people, because you're saying you want somebody working for less than market for Roku, and you're saying they have to live in Plano, Texas.
Yeah.
You know. Hire anyone you want from that pool of 0 people you just created. And they're like, yes, we know. We need to go through this for a month or 2 to let the people we're recruiting for realize we're serious. You've limited us down to 0. Because they think it's hiring a Java or C# developer.
Yeah,
you know, 3 million of them. Like, no. You know, I don't know if there's 1,000 professional level Roku developers in the world. Maybe there is. I don't know.
Didn't Roku at their Dev Summit last year say they had 100,000 developers? Wasn't that the number? I think it was.
Did they have 100,000 people hit the keys to Twitter in the development mode? Maybe.
I don't know, but
probably just 100,000 devices in development mode. I've got like 5 or 6. So
yeah, I have 7 now. I've thrown 3 away or 4 away. I've sent 1 to Bromley, so I have 14 in development mode. I'm still 1 developer. I'll always be 1 developer. I don't know. Like I said, I'll talk to people and I'm like, I don't know if there's 1,000. But
you know,
if the market has changed, I didn't know about that, because I'm still getting recruiter hits. But it's for FTE positions, not for consulting jobs.
Yeah.
Now, how many of those demand you to be on site? That'd be a problem. How many of those think they're going to get a Roku developer for $50,000 a year? That'd be a problem. And there are recruiters out there. I was like, yeah, we pay 65,000. It's like, yeah, you're not going to get anybody. It's a niche market and it's a seller's market. You know, we can make more than that doing C# or Java.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, companies that want to hire and don't realize the market, and they have to get a couple of bruises and then realize, no, you're going to pay 200 grand. Then they kind of get the wake up call and realize what it's going to do.
Yep. Any last questions from anybody?
Yeah, I think we're about out of time here. So would love feedback of anyone who had any thoughts on what we've done and what we need to change, and if we need to make it more regimented or whatever, less football, whatever. And we were going to start doing this every second Thursday. We have a whole list of topics to go through. Today was kind of the initial and kind of a looser list. But we were going to start doing this every month, every second Thursday at 1 o'clock. And hopefully keep it
1
going.
o'clock your time.
1 o'clock my time. I'm sorry.
We don't all live where you live.
Yeah, after I move, it'll be like 10 o'clock in the evening my time.
It's commitment.
George goes through the same thing. He's living in the UK. So we're at an odd time for him. But hopefully we can keep this going. You know, because even like today, you know, I've been doing this a long time, but there's tidbits I got out of this that I didn't know, you know, and we're not going to get it from the docs, and, you know, we're not going to get it from training materials that don't exist. So hopefully keep this going.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. We can keep chatting in the Slack, and we'll see y'all at the Dev Summit next week, and then one of these next month.
Appreciate everyone coming. See y'all later.